Ladies and gentlemen, now we will have a presentation on advancing decent work in Bangladesh, human right due diligence. This segment will be presented by Mr. Syed Fazle Niaz, Team Lead, BetterWork, Bangladesh, ILO. Duration of this presentation will be 10 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Syed Fazle Niaz for his presentation.
Good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum everyone. So as you can see, advancing decent work in Bangladesh, human rights due diligence. So this is very intricately and indispensably interconnected. So this is why I think ILO as an overall, we have made it a mandate that we will be working towards this more and more. So very, very quickly, what is it? Because sometimes when we say human rights due diligence, it feels like this is very self-explanatory. Okay, human rights, we do due diligence. And sometimes it feels like, okay, what is it all about? What do I have to do? How is it relevant for me? Can you tell me more? So I will try to give you a little bit of definition. It says enterprise directly so that it feels more relevant for us. So it's a way for enterprises to proactively, bit of an operative word here, manage potential and actual adverse human rights impacts with which they are involved. So that's how you are relevant for that. And if we talk about major three areas, this particular area is coming a little bit from the United Nations guiding principles, but I thought that would be a little bit easier for us to kind of connect how does it involve. So first we start with the protection. And that mostly goes to the state for them to do and help us and support us to do everything that we as enterprises or the supply chain or the business or the owners can take all those instruments and ride ahead of those curves. Respect, something that also comes with the government that, we have heard since this morning, like everybody said, people need to respect the regulations, people need to respect the policies and all these legal frameworks for this to work. So that starts with the respect for the laws, respect for the human rights. And there is a bit of a difference between the human rights due diligence and human rights due diligence law. I'll go into that very soon. And respect is where I think enterprises and the business are mostly relevant, that you have to respect. This is a corporate responsibility to make sure that you are doing your job right. And sometimes, if I may say, even if there is no legal framework at place, you may be still subject to those kind of requirements. And of course, it doesn't work if there is no access to remedy. Everything is there, legal framework there. We want to respect human rights due diligence. We want to respect human rights. But what if things don't go the way it should all the time? Where is the access of remedy? So that is something also very, very critical pillar or aspect of the human rights due diligence. We can go into the detail, maybe not for now, but just quickly drop a note that this can have like judicial, non-judicial, informal, formal, many forms. So we don't have to really look at one single avenue to think about remedy. A question, why now? I will go into the next slide also to see human rights due diligence as a concept, as a requirement, as an ask by all the government, international organizations, and the civil societies over the years have always been there. We will see, maybe I will go to the next slide and then come back here. As you can see, the ILO Tripartite Declarations for Principles, we shortly call it M&E Declaration. We have United Nations Guiding Principles. We have OECD Guidelines. These are three major instruments that many of us know about, and these talk directly about human rights due diligence and responsible business conduct. The first one, even the M&E ILO one, has been since the 70s, late 70s. So it has been decades that we have had these guidelines, we have had these directives in a way for us to follow. But somewhere we have also learned that it doesn't really work all the time. There are guidelines, so okay, this is how you do it, this is what you can do. But where is the urgency? How do you make sure, and how do we make sure that everybody along the supply chain, labor rights, human rights, all together are being respected? And on the process of making profit, nobody is costing human rights and human lives. So where do we make sure that it happens? And the legal framework, of course, doesn't always give you that protection all the time, but that's a good start. So that's where I think it's creating a bit of an urgency. I think we have heard this about in the previous sessions that European Union's proposed mandatory due diligence law, directive, and we already have the HRDD law of France, Netherlands, Switzerland, Norway, and Germany. These are already in place. The EU due diligence is proposed and potentially to be active anytime soon. I kept Japanese guidelines on responsible supply chain because this is still a soft law, but just to maybe give a signal that even if it is a soft law, and I do not speak on behalf of anyone, but this is a very, very clear momentum where the global supply chain and the market economy are going. So unless we take care of these things, maybe it's gonna be very, very challenging if I wear my Bangladeshi hat for a second to keep our, global competitiveness as we want this to be. We talked about this. So I already talked about this. So why urgent? Is it urgent for me? So maybe simple 3 questions that you can start asking. So as I was saying, human rights due diligence has been applicable, is applicable for everyone, everywhere. But okay, how do we create the urgency? Maybe a good question to start with, do I export? To where? If I take Bangladesh for a second, do I export? Because sometimes I can be from an industry and the human rights due diligence is still applicable for me, but maybe not now that urgency. If you do it, great, but that urgency is coming from the fact the mandatory laws coming soon and already in place that I just showed you. Do you export? Where do you export to? For example, if it's Europe or a European country that already has enacted a law, that's exactly now urgency for you. That's, I think, very simple and clear. Timeline and preparedness, I'm not going to be able to go into any detail, but something that you can also think about. So where are these laws? When are these coming? How is it applicable? So if I have a buyer coming from Europe, so okay, does that change any dynamic of the relationship that I have had with my buyer? So they have had all the COCs, the code of conducts for like last 4 decades. So is it the same thing? Does it change? When? So please, this is something I just wanted to trigger as a question for the forum. And of course, the next panel discussion will be based on that. So this is something as a context I'm building to just give it over to the next panel moderator. Coming at the nearly end is like, just a reminder, is like maybe due diligence is nothing new. This is a very important message that I want to re-emphasize. Due diligence is nothing new. So due diligence is a process. We have done it. We have known this. Sometimes we have failed to probably do exactly the way it should be, but it has always been there. Now we have to do more. We have heard this since this morning. No, less talk, more walk, right? We have heard this, so that we'll have to do. And just to maybe give another clarity is like, simple process like, okay, I need to identify where the gaps are. If I want to prevent, what do I prevent? How do I become proactive? Because we saw you have to proactively manage as an enterprise. Okay, how do I do that? So I have to also mitigate and remedy because not everything is in my control, circle of influence. How do I find out where things are? And then how do I make sure I transparently communicate at every possible level? And every possible level meaning also essentially workers' voice. How do I make sure those process owners at every possible levels are being heard, consulted, and made sure that they're part of it, the decision-making process necessarily. Thank you so very much.